Buenas tardes y a todas.
Good evening to all. My name is Patricia. I am in charge of communications at UISG. With much joy, we have this meeting to listen to comments about the third encyclical letter of Pope Francis, which was published yesterday. It was interesting because the Vatican website could not even manage all the entries, so for some time it did not work. This means that this shows the interest around this encyclical letter. Fratelli Tutti. Tonight's panel is made up of the president of USG, Yolanda Kafka, Pat Murray, and 3 members of the council to listen to their comments in the initial panel. We'll have, however, other meetings to dig deeper into this encyclical letter. The text is very long. There are 8 chapters, and the Pope repeats the word fraternity 44 times and the word solidarity 22 times. I think that this already sets the stage where the theology and pastoral of Pope Francis are found. This document is like another small piece of a puzzle that the Pope is building, putting together, starting with Evangelii Gaudium, then Laudato Si, and now Fratelli Tutti, without forgetting the document he signed in Abu Dhabi about universal fraternity. And I also remind you of the 2 events that will be held in October about education, the global agreement on education and November economy. So Pope Francis is touching on all the aspects of our life because we need a change toward a universal fraternity. We decided to begin with a video for the first time. We prepared several tools. There were several tools prepared to spread this document as much as possible. So we're going to begin by watching a video that was prepared by
con l'italiano.
No, non ti capisco, Flo, che cosa devo fare? Devo andare dove? Non ti entiendo.
Some weren't hearing English translation and some were looking for Italian.
Okay, so I will repeat. Yes, we can repeat that for
le traduzioni stanno bene.
Yeah, but some people are asking where they have to click.
Sì, ma non ti sento molto forte. Non ti sento molto forte in italiano.
Claudia.
No, molto basso.
Claudia, quindi il problema è suo?
Sì, un po'.
Ok. Sì,
per le altre, rassicuratevi che avete scelto il portoghese
e Patrizia, tu parli su che canale?
Io sono fuori di tutto.
Patrizia, in che canale tu parli?
Sono fuori di tutto.
Ok, va bene.
So just I want to repeat for the people who just arrived that to select the language, you have to click on the icon interpretation, select your language. Per le persone che sono appena arrivate, in basso trovate un'icona interpretazione e per l'italiano dovete scegliere il portoghese. Para las personas que acaban de llegar, para seleccionar español, en el icono abajo interpretación, seleccionar español. Ahora empezamos.
We now begin.
Bueno, creo que es un video que nos
I
impacta
think
mucho
this video has a strong impact,
y de verdad nos invita a
and it truly invites us to this united humanity as well as fraternal. We now continue. I want to give the floor to Sister Yolanda so she can help us. Well, first, I would like, well, Sister Yolanda is the president of UISG, Sister Yolanda Kafka, Claritin Sister. Firstly, I'd like to ask you, Yolanda, what struck you the most about this text? I know you've talked a lot, and if you can also tell us a little about chapter 2, about this catechesis of the Samaritan and the Samaritan men and women. Good afternoon or good morning. We are truly touched, moved by this delivery of the encyclical, by how it touches on the essential points of our life, that is, being a human being as a brother and sister to all. It is as if all of a sudden our family got extended, as if suddenly we remember once again that so many millions of people in the world can be brothers and sisters, as if I broadened my tent where I live and where I achieve my mission. I think that this is something that is not intellectual, but it's about feeling something within. I was struck by this, the broadness of this theme. I must recognize that I could not imagine that an encyclical that is then classified in the social doctrine as a social doctrine could be so broad, could have such a wide scope. So it's not just social teaching, it covers a whole pastoral, spiritual, human, anthropological path of dialogue, and of course, a theological path as well. It is something that I feel that I still have to delve into. I've had very little time to be able to read it, but that's what I carry with me as a task and as a broad horizon. Certainly, the encyclical letter has some very concrete parts. I understand I can continue interpreting and commenting on that second chapter of the icon that the Pope chose to as the leitmotif that runs through the whole encyclical letter. Before we get into this icon, I want to express the gratitude of all of us religious, but I think of all of religious life, because felt we felt as we received a gift through this encyclical, which touches on our vocation of being brothers and sisters. I also want to thank the whole team who contributed to give us the main languages immediately, and they delivered the copies to us. The Pope sets an objective in this encyclical, and it appears in the main points. Once you get into this letter, the Pope says that his objective is to give a humble contribution to the reflection in this world where, in the face of so many ways of ignoring our brother, of passing by people and groups of people, we have to rethink the relationship among human beings, the nations and organizations, and we need to change our way of proceeding. However, the Pope wants us to take this up and to join in this dream of humanity on the path of the human flesh as children of one same earth. And he repeats that blessing again, that beatitude that Saint Francis mentions. Blessed the one who loves so much his brother when he's far, as much as when he is close to him. The path suggested by the Pope is an open path, an open dialogue, and it seems interesting to see how these two words come to play in the encyclical open. To opening. It is one of the words that is repeated most often in the encyclical, and it goes against everything that is closing or close. We even see this in the titles. I think this makes an impact. The word of the Samaritan, that is the thread that goes through the encyclical. It's not only mentioned in the second chapter, but it is brought back many times. The Pope places us on a path, on a journey, and he makes us travel on the same path of this parable. He makes us walk down that path to Jerusalem, toward Jericho, and he situates us in the parable. The Pope makes us go down, and he invites us to look at ourselves in this parable as if we were looking at a mirror, and to look at the project within the same. We notice, and the Pope invites us to consider that we notice that the entire humanity is made up of us, the wounded, those who pass by, but we're also Samaritans. So I'd like to stop and think about these four aspects. The entire humanity, all of us, carry some wounds, some personal scars, and the entire populations have these wounds, the wounds of exclusion that deprives you from the right to exist in truth and justice, the wounds of the women with no rights, wounds that shut down history of violence, wounds of ignoring a brother or ignoring a part of the world as if it didn't exist. We're all wounded, as the Pope says. We're also a little, we're all marked by the selfishness that sometimes justifies us as we take over the goods of the others, justifying and making us indifferent to the equality. Also, we're all those who pass by, those who justify a lack of commitment because we are too busy. We pass by, not acknowledging not just the concrete people. We also pass by so much deprivation and exclusion in the world without participating with those who defend themselves. The Pope underlines that those who pass by in the parable come from a religious world, and that unmasks a false manner of understanding religion and adoration. The Pope quotes St. John and says, if you wish to honor the body of Christ, do not despise it as you contemplate it naked. It There cannot be true adoration of God if we do not take charge of our own brother. And then he says it more strongly, the way of living faith, the way of relating to the brothers go hand in hand. In addition, for us, faith fills this motivation, and it strongly motivates us to recognize and acknowledge the other. The Pope invites us to overcome our way of understanding religion as simply an adoration, and he sends us forth toward the brother. And finally, the Pope says that every human person has the potential to be a good Samaritan, to train and get out of what he calls illiteracy and accompaniment, and to move into a different logic of the encounter. And here we see the important verbs. Lower ourselves, take charge, care, be compassionate. The Pope says that Jesus in this parable wants to make an appeal to the best part of the human spirit, what is found in every human being, that is compassion. And he advises us, I think this is very picturesque, he tells us that sometimes we waste a lot of energy in following the highwaymen, in looking for the causes of evil, while the suffering ones are being neglected. So once again, he shakes us, and he tells us, do not ask where he comes from and where he's going. He's wounded, and he's your brother. This better part of the human being, this capacity to be attentive to the other's fragility, is part of our being because we are made in the image of God, and he is in himself a relationship of love and mutual giving. So we are capable of giving ourselves to this logic, to move out of ourselves and to go toward the encounter. Thank you so much, Yolanda. This is like the substrata of what invites us to place this icon at the center, as well as behind me in this map that accompanies me. I want to make a note, because in the Congress for Religious Life in 2004, this icon of the Good Samaritan was very deepened. It may be good to go back to these contents that can enlighten us today. So may we all be Samaritans, and the Pope in this icon sees a program, a plan, so as to rebuild this world. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Yolanda. Hemos empezado con esto.
Thank you, Yolanda. We've begun with this moment of important contemplation. This encyclical letter accompanies us to recognize what we already know, that we are a family. He speaks a lot about opening. This word makes me breathe. It's a very powerful invitation. I think that this meeting is held because we, us the women, feel this need to heal the wounds. And at this point, I go on to Pat Murray, the Executive Secretary of UISG. Her congregation is the Institute of Blessed Virgin Mary. And we ask Pat, what struck you? What impact did this encyclical letter make on you? But you, Pat, you also know the world of the sisters in many countries. you know that the sisters are capable of healing the wounds. Can you tell us something about how we can help this broken and divided world as women and as women religious? Your microphone, sister.
Thank you, Patricia. First of all, I think I need to say that this encyclical really demands reading and reflecting again and again. It's a very beautiful, but a very challenging and dense text. And each of the chapter, when I read it, and I think I've read it 3 or 4 times now, I say to myself, this encyclical will require us to reflect, to read, to reflect, to educate ourselves, and also to pray over. It calls us to enter at a deep level into the life of humanity. And what really struck me was that the Pope has framed this encyclical in the light of see, judge, and act. And we're reminded that God sees with the heart. So seeing is not just seeing from afar, but in the encyclical, we're reminded that we have to touch the suffering, that we have to draw near, that we have to be, in a sense, drawn into the vulnerability and suffering of the other, because in a way it mirrors our own suffering, our own defenselessness, our own vulnerability. And certainly in this time of COVID, we've experienced that right across the world. So the seeing, in a way, is really a seeing with the eyes, the ears, with touch, with taste, with all our senses, that we enter into the brokenness of the world. And I think we as sisters are called to do that in our ministries. Also, as we read a newspaper, see a television program, that can be something that's distant from us, or in the words of the encyclical, something that we have to draw into the core of our being. And I think throughout the encyclical, we're seeing the judging, the analysis. And I think in all the areas that we're involved in, whether it's working with migrants and refugees, whether it's involved with people who have sadly been trafficked, whether it's with the unemployed, whether it's with people who feel excluded in any way from society, we need to enter and to do the analysis and understand what are the systems and structures of our world today that keep people outside, keep people at the margins, keep people from feeling that they are less important, less worthy, less human. So I think the analysis of the phenomena that we're looking at today is very important, because we have to understand the dynamics that are happening in our world. And right throughout the encyclical, at various points, the analysis is done, whether it's of political systems or social systems, or also of economic and financial systems. We have to look at the impact that they are playing on the lives of people, how they exclude and how they benefit some to the exclusion of many, many more. And then there's the whole call to action. And that call to action, you know, in ways, the encyclical talks often about seeds. I think there's one line that says, if I even have changed the life of one person, then my life has been valuable. But it also is looking at action that needs to be taken in terms of social movements, through politics, through community action, through our own individual reaching out to the other. So I see it as multivaried, the kinds of actions that we're called to, because there's to be actions of the heart. And I was very struck by some of the images that the Pope uses in the Encyclical. You know, he talks about the culture of walls, walls of the heart, but he says also walls of the land, which prevent encounters with other cultures, and where somehow we become slaves within the walls, and it limits our horizons. So in some way we're being called to break down walls as sisters. I think it's no coincidence that in the project we have in Sicily, we see ourselves as building bridges. And I think that's the call to us as sisters and as brothers worldwide, to see where we can create bridges across every divide that exists. And those bridges are bridges of encounter and bridges of dialogue. The Pope reminds us we're all in the same boat. I saw an image the other day, I listened to it, and it really struck me. It said, yes, we're all on the same sea, but some are in yachts and others are clinging to debris in the ocean. So we're all in it, but we're not in the same kind of boat. We're in different boats. And in some of the boats, are isolated and indifferent from the other boats. And some of the boats are working to choose closeness and encounter. So we have to say to ourselves, you know, which boat are we in? The boat of isolation or the boat of closeness? Because again and again, the Encyclical says, one person's problem is my problem, is our problem. And look how the Pope points out that we've lost the taste of fraternity. And I think this word taste is very provocative. When you think he talked about the smell of the sheep. So he's telling us to use our senses. And in the Franciscan tradition, fraternity has to do with the kind of relationship that we make with one another, how we reach out to one another, especially to the stranger and to the person who is different. So if we recover our taste of fraternity, we'll get a taste of what's real in today's world. And then we must rethink our lifestyle, our relationships, and the way we organize ourselves. So for us as religious, when we get the taste of wanting to build this one family, what are the ministries that we then feel called to, that are bridge building, that are calling us together? And then with strong words, he says, you know, the temptation is to plunge into feverish consumerism or to gorge ourselves in networking. Listen to those words, plunging and gorging. They're words of excess. And the Encyclical reminds us that's not where we're called. That's not where community is built. We need one another. We need a rebirth of the human family with all in that family, every face, every hand, every voice, beyond the walls, break down the walls, so that we create a community of belonging, so that there are no borders. So in a way, I think as religious, we're being called to break down the borders between rich and poor, borders between those who have houses, those who have no shelter, borders between those who are settled and belong to a country and those who are migrants. We can think of all the borders that are there. And finally, I would just say at this point, the road we have to travel is the road of closeness. We have to commit ourselves to closeness to one another, to a culture of encounter, which will be mutually enriching, but also mutually changing, because we need to see the other. We need to see ourselves through the eyes of the other. We need to be called to change through the eyes of the other, so that all of us can dwell together in this common home. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Pat. Este encuentro se está perfectamente
Thank you,
volviendo.
Pat. This meeting, this encounter is becoming what we wanted, almost a contemplation of this text, which seems a healing in itself. And the words of women are always helpful. It is also very beautiful. I see the beautiful things you're writing on the chat, the breaking the walls, taste the fraternity, be seeds. It's true that one of the objectives of this meeting today was to taste at a deeper level, although we may need time, but we need to taste this text at a deeper level. Now, thank you, Pat. We continue now with Sister Franca Zonta, our Vice President. She's a Marianist sister, and with her, we always ask her what struck her, what touched her in this text. And we ask her to help us enter this dynamic of openness by continuing along the line of Pat's reflection, this opening of windows, doors, and heart. Thank you. Her microphone is muted.
Aperto? Sì. Grazie, buonasera.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And by reading this encyclical, I also was able to read, since when we started reading yesterday, I can see the image of Pope Francis as a person who is sowing, and he is really the one who is mentioned in the parable, in the gospel. He's the one who is going out, and this is a word that is very important for him. He's going out to without thinking of where he's working throughout the world, and he's always suing, and he's always talking to everybody, to all people of goodwill, and he's not worrying if the seed is falling on the rock or if is falling where there is no land. He's just working, and this is a courage that he has to sow without worrying about the land, because he knows there will be a good land where there will be fruit. And I can see that as the previous two encyclicals had something that is connected to this present encyclical, and with the previous encyclicals, the Pope was able to prepare this land for this great encyclical, this great seed that he wants to sow, that is the one of human fraternity. And there will be, of course, difficulties along the way. There will be those who will try to destroy this seed and also to criticize all this, but there is a good land, and of course this is going to bear fruit. And I can see that this encyclical will be fruitful, especially where somebody is not expecting this fruit. And this is a great trust, and as Pope Francis we are called to sow. And what struck me is the invitation to change perspective, as I can see this encyclical as a great invitation to change perspective and to go from thinking of oneself, one's own country, and to be able to see one's own family and one's own country, to go out of selfishness in order to look at what is out beyond my little garden. And of course, we are called not to we are called to look after our garden, because by doing that we are able also to care for the neighborhood that is also mentioned here as a community, also to talk about a country and about a big human family to which we belong. And this is a kind of a local sight and at the same time a global sight and perspective. And is something that is that is hard to look at the same time, but that allows us to look at the local reality without forgetting the global reality. So these are two kind of poles which are also essential, even they are inseparable: universal fraternity and social friendship. And therefore, it is very important to care of what is local to go towards what is universal. And the Pope is mentioning also concrete examples. And in order to do this, we have to welcome, using these verbs, welcoming, protecting, promoting, and integrating. While he is mentioning migrants as well, it is important not only to welcome, but to reach integration, as especially like this process cannot be stopped, but it has to be completed towards integration. And that is why he's giving concrete steps, such as, for example, to simplify visa, the human corridors, and also give shelters and give justice, an impartial justice for everyone, and everything that is needed. There are several concrete steps. And of course, the Pope is always concrete through his messages in what is affirming. And that is why we can see a very concrete indication that he's giving. And I believe it is important since migrations, as he says, should be avoided. But in order to do that, we should create in the countries of origin concrete possibilities so that a person can live with dignity. And that is why he's reiterating also the right of everybody to choose one's own right, to choose one's own place where one can realize himself or herself, to have a family, and also to go and go somewhere else, because this is the right of one person, of every person. And it is important to see a migrant not as a threat, but as a gift. And this is an opportunity of encounter. And therefore, I believe that it's important to see how the West and the East, as the Encyclical mentions, they depend on each other. They cannot live independently of each other. So it is a reciprocal necessity that they have, and both have the need to see each other, as also John Paul II was saying in the past. It is important to breathe with both lungs. We need the West and the East, and the East can take care of all the illnesses produced by the West through the materialism and also spiritual sicknesses, and while the East is needing the West in order to go out of divisions and conflicts. And so there is a reciprocal need. and only the collaboration and solidarity can really save, as we have mentioned. We all are on the same boat, and it is not possible to save ourselves without others. And this is something that I really appreciated. And also the gift of giving one's own in a gratuitous way. And we have to help the marginalized, the poor, and through this, indirectly, we also enrich ourselves. But this is not the main reason. In order to help, we need to have a free way of giving, and giving because it is important, because it is good, and not because one has an interest in that. And therefore, we should help migrants and countries and in this perspective of giving freely. And also the law, the right of property, and this is also what the Pope is saying, is not that we should abolish it, but we should see it as the right to care of what I have, what are my belongings, but for the good of everyone, and also for the good of my country and my family. And this is also a right that has to take care of my good, but also of everyone's good. So the common good is what is important. This is how we should look at the property right. So, so this is a way of dreaming together, of working together for a common project. And the Pope is insisting on this human fraternity and on feeling that we are members of a same family, and that we are, of course, members of one family as members of humanity. And this is how we should work and collaborate in this spirit of solidarity. And going from us in our neighborhood to us as consecrated women, to then us as we, as a family, as humanity. And therefore, this is a text that is going to help us particularly to change our perspective, as Pope Francis is suggesting. So this is how I feel in my heart, very grateful, because he is very brave. He is brave in a prophetic way, and he's inviting us to move a step forward, as he showed at the beginning with the first two encyclical, and now we have to go with another step forward to change our perspective. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, hermana Franca.
Thank you, Sister Franca, for having underlined this the concrete depth of this text. You made me think that as UISG, we decided this theme for the 2019 plenary, Sowers of Prophetic Hope, sowing the land, the place, getting into this dynamic of a single family makes me think that sometimes we may be those who need the Samaritan. Sometimes we are wounded, fractured, and we're not always those who have to go toward the other. Sometimes we have to let the other accompany us and heal us. So thank you very much. We continue with Sister Roxanne shares religious school sisters of Notre Dame. I couldn't say it in Spanish. She's a member of the UISG Council, and we're going to ask her to tell us about what struck her in this text, and at the same time the topic, the theme of religion. The Pope always touches on ecumenical themes, that we are one together, not just as Catholics. How can religion help? How can it truly be at the service of fraternity? Thank you, Sister Roxanne.
Thank you, Patrizia. Hello, everyone. Good evening, and whatever time of day it is. I found the encyclical very rich and deeply challenging. I found it calling us to a new way of life, of living the gospel in these times. And what particularly touched me was the many references to our vulnerability, which surely the pandemic has exposed. And when Pope Francis spoke about how we are still illiterate when it comes to accompanying, caring for, and supporting the most frail and vulnerable, I wondered, and I asked myself, how do we embrace our vulnerability? How do we accompany others in their vulnerability? And as I reflected on that in some of the ministries in the past, I realized that one way is to identify with the vulnerability of others and then begin to acknowledge our shared vulnerability. In that process, we can begin to discern a way of recreating our human community and building a common future. It's being mutual in our accompaniment, being mutual in our solidarity that I think helps us discover God's gift of hope among us. And so when I look at this section, a chapter on religions at the service of fraternity, I realize that people of religion truly are a source of hope. As people of faith, with our very diverse beliefs, still hold a common fundamental belief in the transcendent one. And so we are entrusted with a unique service to the world. And I believe that is to witness to God, the transcendent one, and to transcendent truth, that we are children of God, sisters and brothers of one another. And this will demand new ways of living and engaging with one another. And as Pope Francis says, it offers a prophetic and spiritual contribution so greatly needed in our world today. The challenge, of course, is to live this truth, to undertake the journey of being and living as sisters and brothers requires us to defend justice and live and work for peace, always giving attention to the common good and integral human development of all. And as religions are so dedicated to direct service often, we're challenged to bring that into our ministries, ministries of service, ministries of empowerment, advocacy, and community action. One word that was used many times in this last chapter is the word journey. And as I reflected on it and looked at what Pope Francis was saying, I realized that we are involved in a journey of transformation, a journey that often begins with identifying with the least, becoming painfully aware of the burdens they carry, and receiving their suffering as our own. And of course, that requires a journey of encounter, where we can meet one another, come to know one another, share the joys and struggles, grow in respect of one another, appreciate our difference, and value the richness of diversity that's necessary to create and shape an authentic unity. This journey of encounter will lead us to a journey of peace that's possible among religions and among all peoples. That, as some have already said tonight, that begins with God's way of seeing with God's heart. And with such seeing, we realize that all forms of violence are a distortion of the truth of who God is and of who we are, all beloved children of God. Pope Francis noted that as religious leaders, and I can say as sisters, we are called to be true people of dialogue, to cooperate in building peace, not as intermediaries, but as authentic mediators. I realize how each of us is called to be an advocate for peace and an artisan of peace, by uniting, as he said, and not dividing, by extinguishing hatred and not holding on to it, by opening paths of dialogue and not by constructing new walls. And as I reflected further, it's in dialogue and with open hearts to the world and to all people that we find ourselves on a journey toward full communion. He often speaks of a universal communion with the entire human family, where no one is abandoned, excluded, or forgotten. So in this journey, we can offer a common witness to the love of God for all people by working together in the service of humanity. In our working together as religious, as people of faith, of all religions, we become a sign of unity and an instrument of communion as we build bridges among each other, as we break down the walls, as we heal hearts, and as we sow seeds of reconciliation. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, hermana Roxanne.
Thank you, Sister Roxanne. It is very difficult to resonate. It is a movement that is within us. I was struck by accompanying us in this vulnerability that affects all of us, especially now with this pandemic, to recreate this community, this global community, to be people of dialogue, not intermediaries, but mediators. Yesterday, during the press conference, I don't remember who said, one said, the Pope is not looking for partners, he's seeking brothers and sisters. And I think that this changes our perspective, as we said before. Okay, last but not least, Sister Aurora Torres of Mary Reparatrix, General Superior as the others. Aurora, we asked Aurora to help us deepen after having told us what strikes her the most, to help us deepen the theme of dialogue and of this social friendship that the Pope speaks about. Thank you, Aurora. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Firstly, I wish to say that what struck me the most in this encyclical is his outlook. I feel him as a prophet who indicates what is causing a damage, what is taking away the human being, pointing out fraternity, sorority is breaking, and he wants to save, to rescue this, and he gives us a path of hope. He says he invites us to look at reality with hope at number 55. He also speaks of having this thirst, and this made me think of the Beatitudes as we say, blessed those who are hungry and thirsty because they will be satisfied. And the Pope invites us, awakens the desire and the thirst to go back to what is essential in what we are as a humanity, brothers and sisters. And what struck me is that I see, as Pat said, he points out to look at the reality, he brightens it, and that invites us to commit. He points out some very concrete realities of exclusion, of throwing away, of fragility, of not keeping in mind. And this indicates a path. There are several things I really appreciate how he simply says, let us ask to be brothers so that the others may feel us as brothers and sisters. And I feel this very strongly. We who call ourselves sisters, the others, do the others really feel me as a sister? Can they rely on me as a sister? After the process that the Pope goes through, I'm struck how he can mention so many realities, political, social, cultural, economic. He touches on many aspects. And we want to have this capability of seeking within internally to benefit from this reflection he invites us to make. And specifically about the 6th chapter, dialogue and social friendship, I'm struck by how this chapter begins by saying what dialogue is through verbs, what it means to have a dialogue. He speaks of approaching, expressing, listening to ourselves, to look at ourselves, get to know, try to understand, search for points of contact. And while I was reading this, I was reflecting and I was saying, well, this is a whole program, a project of life, because this invites me to, first of all, look at myself, to look at my attitude. What attitude of openness do I have about getting out of myself to approach? I was thinking about realities because the Pope mentions them. He mentions very harsh realities, difficult ones. Sometimes it is difficult to, well, it's nice to speak with a friend, right? But when you come across some difficulty, I was thinking when there's a misunderstanding, when something doesn't go well, we need to have a dialogue. And this coming out of oneself, approaching the other, taking the initiative, all of this brings about a movement. There's a whole movement that I'm invited to in order to have a dialogue. And he also mentions that it is not about exchanging, not about exchanging opinions. Having a dialogue is not about you tell me your opinion, I'll tell you mine, and each one stays in his or her position. It's about truly listening. He also speaks a lot about truth, but not a truth that locks you, rather a truth that frees you and that seeks the common good. He also, I like how he speaks about the tensions, And he does this in relation to the differences. He says that we think that differences sometimes cause problems. He invites us to look at these as something that is creative, which may cause tensions, and resolving tensions is an improvement, is progress for humanity. I was saying that in light of all the tensions we experience in the world, how can we truly enter into real dialogues? I appreciated how he invites us to be artisans of peace and this world craftsmanship, things that are done so delicately. I was remembering an exhibition that there was during AUISG assembly, when we said, when we make a sweater, you do it on a machine, you do it very quickly, but an artisan will pay attention to each and every stitch. She feels as each comes out of the person. How can we be artisans of peace and create a culture of encounter? He has talked about this many times, and we see that it is something he insists upon very strongly. How can we truly search for points of encounter? He says that if I'm convinced, some desires will emerge, and those desires move me to look for an encounter. This is what I underlined in these many realities of conflict. With a dialogue, we can make progress. And then at the end, he says, let us teach our children. Let us give them the weapons of dialogue. Let's arm them with weapons of dialogue, and let's teach them the battle of the encounter. This is something that is active. Something that struck me also is what he says about kindness. How can you be kind? Use please, thank you. And he says when there's a kind gesture, it is like a star in the middle of darkness. What I also need to underline is how he speaks of the original people, the indigenous people, the cultures that sometimes are despised, but who live in great wisdom. How can we take advantage and rescue this wisdom that humanizes and does not seek for development as we search for it in this system that is just wearing us out? I could say that there are many aspects in this dialogue and this social friendship that stems from an encounter, from coming out of ourselves. These verbs, grow closer, taking the initiative, and being capable of expressing ourselves kindly, to listen to each other, and to be able to search. He says, try to search for a meeting, an encounter, to grow closer. This is an important task, I think, for all of us. I think we have a great opportunity for dialogue, to meet, to establish bridges. As the other sisters have said, how can we continue? And I too made an exam of consciousness. How am I being a sister for the others? How am I talking, or am I doing a monologue? The encyclical can help us personally, at the personal, community, social, political level, all the dimensions. When you throw a stone into the water, you see the ripples. How can these ripples of hope and love and prophecy reach everyone to be a more human world? Let us rescue this project of God for the entire humanity. Thank you. There's still a lot to be reflected on. Thank you, Aurora. We'll have more meetings to deepen. Today, we just aimed at creating a moment of sharing. We're also considering some time to interact, but we are very many and it's quite late. In addition, there's like a parallel conference on the chat box because the testimonies and sentences are truly beautiful. So I thank you all. And I think, Aurora, we have to rescue this theme about the searching internally. It's an invitation to go back to what is essential, and dialogue is seen as a movement. I think that this text is full of flesh in the true and deep sense that it carries within. I'd like to thank you. We have to finish. I want to thank you all, specifically the sisters who've shared their reflections. I want to thank Marilu and Claudia, the interpreters. I want to thank Therese and Florence, who allow us to hold these beautiful moments thanks to their technical support. We want to finish with a brief video because we, the women, know how to do many of the things that are within this text. Sorry for this moment of pride, but when you look at this video, you'll understand. This is a campaign that UISG is carrying forward. It's called You Are My Sister. It is about how to give visibility to the beautiful prophetic action of female religious life during this time of COVID. So let's enjoy it.
Cuando la gente sabe que nosotros somos hermanas, tiene más confianza, se abre más. Nuestro trabajo, yo pienso que más.
Our work, I think, more than anything, it's about caring for life, those who were infected, but those who need care and attention.
La voz de que se levanta para ser la voz de aquellos que no pueden hablar por ellos. Como mujer podemos hacer la diferencia, pero como mujeres juntas podemos hacer mucho más.
To help some families who are experiencing difficulty in this time of pandemic, we start reaching out to the families of our school children.
We're going now to another place with 14 families. They are also in need of help, especially food supply.
The coronavirus came and all the institutions were made to close, and we could not do anything within the center as we always run the social programs. For that time, we decided to be preparing the food from the center and carry it to the streets.
One day, one of the self-help group women called and said, "Sister, today we have nothing to eat." We decided We will start cooking and sending some food, we thought. And our sisters, as parents, novices, they all cooked here in our kitchen.
கொரோனா டைமில் எங்களுக்கு வந்து ஹெல்ப் பண்ணுது. எங்களெல்லாம் எப்படி இருக்கீங்கன்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஃபோன் பண்ணி விசாரிக்கிறாங்க. எதுனா இல்லைன்னா கஷ்டத்தையெல்லாம் என்கிட்ட சொல்லுங்க, என்ன வேணும்னு என்கிட்ட சொல்லுங்கன்னு சொன்னாங்க.
Espero que les haya gustado.
I hope you appreciated. You can find other similar videos on our page. But really, this seems like an invitation to work together as women, men, brothers and sisters. And I want to bring this meeting to an end with a brief prayer that is precisely at the end of the text of the Pope, because I think that all of us, in order to open doors, break down walls, and build bridges, we need the help of the Holy Spirit.
Ven, Espíritu Santo. Muéstranos tu hermosura.
Come, Holy Spirit, show us your beauty reflected on all the peoples of earth in order to discover that all are important, all are necessary, that they are different faces of the same humanity that you love. Amen. Thank you all. Thank you all for your patience. We're going to break walls, build the bridges, and open windows. Let's go. And let's also dance to the dialogue and taste life. Thank you all. Greetings, and let's stay on our path. We keep journeying. Thank you all.